The December 2nd meeting of the Cape Cod Commission is called to order. And I will ask Elizabeth Taylor if she'll be kindly call the roll.
Barnstable, Royden Richardson.
Present.
Bourne, Michael Blanton. Brewster, Elizabeth Taylor, present. Chatham, Lynn Pleffner.
Present.
Dennis, Richard Roy.
Present.
Eastham, Joy Brookshire. Falmouth, Mario Di Gregorio.
Present.
Harwich, Robert Bradley. Mashpee, Ernest Virgilio. Orleans, Peter Monger.
Present.
Provincetown, Austin Knight.
Present.
Sandwich, Joanne O'Keefe. Truro, Peter Graham. Wellfleet, Roger Putnam.
Here.
Yarmouth, John McCormick Jr.
Here.
County Commissioner Sheila Lyons.
Here.
Minority Representative John Harris. Native American Representative Mark Harding.
Present.
Governor's appointee Herb Olson.
Here. Thank you very much. The next thing in the agenda is public comment on any issue that is not on today's agenda. Seeing none, we'll go on to the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief report today. We had our final watershed tour of the calendar year in Mashpee this week. So that makes six down, 40 watersheds to go. So we're going to be going for a while.
What are you looking for?
We're done until January. But we had a pretty good turnout at each of these, and I think we're making progress. The presentation's getting better. People are becoming engaged, and so that is moving forward in a positive direction. Secondly, I want to announce, if you haven't heard already, that our relationship with IBM was formalized last week. So they'll be working with us, making some phone calls to stakeholders, with probably a workshop to follow in January that will allow us to build a platform on which we can take a lot of the data that's our water quality data that's already being collected out there and create a Center for Water Quality Excellence that I think holds the hope of for the Cape of achieving and restoring water quality in a way that's cost effective and in a way that's much smarter and probably more reliant on technology and less traditional, which should be less expensive. So more to follow on that. And finally, we have a new administrative person at the commission. So Ann Cook is seated next to Gail Coyne over there. So feel free to say hello to Ann. And that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And if we could go on to the next item on the agenda, and the chair would entertain a motion that the minutes of September 30th, 2010 as presented be accepted.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
The chair would also entertain a motion that the minutes of the October 14th, 2010 meeting be approved as presented.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, any comments, corrections? None. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
They pass, and thank you very much. The next thing on our agenda is a public hearing, and I will read the hearing notice first in the absence of the secretary. The Cape Cod Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, December 2nd, 2010, beginning at 3 p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates Chamber, Route 6A, Barnstable. At this hearing, the Commission will consider a proposed amendment to the Regional Land Use Vision Map to review and incorporate the Dennis Land Use Vision Map. The Regional Land Use Vision Map was adopted as part of the 5-year amendment of the Regional Policy Plan, Barnstable County Ordinance 08-14, as amended. And first, I will ask if presentation by Commission staff. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a handout for the commissioners. The map in your packets for this proposed vision map are slightly different than the final version. The difference is quite small. I'm sure Dan Fortier, who is here today, the town planner for Dennis, can note those differences. But with your permission, I'd like to pass these around to the commissioners.
Please.
The Cape Cod Commission has been working with towns to create a regional land use vision map for Cape Cod. The project is an effort to articulate a growth policy for our region in an easily understood map format. The maps are developed using information about sensitive resources, local planning knowledge, and existing patterns of development in order to identify areas where we can focus growth and do resource protection. The map contains 5 broad land use categories: economic centers, villages, industrial service trade areas, resource protection areas, and areas identified as other. Once a map is adopted, DRIs become eligible for certain minimum performance standards that create incentives for investment in economic centers. The map will also guide the application of flexible DRI thresholds through Chapter H, which is the municipal application for revisions to the DRI thresholds for economic centers and industrial service trade areas. On July 12th, the Town of Dennis Planning Board voted to submit their proposed map to the Commission for review and consideration. The Commission's Planning Committee reviewed the map on October 12th and voted to recommend the map for adoption to the full Commission. Dan Fortier is here, and he can provide an overview of the town's vision.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Commission members? Okay. I guess I should have made you come up there earlier.
Okay, it's not waking up. Well, while they get this powered up, I'm Dan Fortier. I'm the town planner for the town of Dennis. I did, and it didn't work. I'm Dan Fortier. I'm the town planner for the town of Dennis. I'm here to explain to you our regional policy plan land use vision proposal, and it appears I may be doing it without the slideshow. You've received a more detailed than what I was going to provide you for this slideshow version up there. It gives all the background information we submitted to the planning committee. We've, I'm sure staff and Mr. Nedwitzky are kind of surprised to see us here at this stage. We had some rather contentious discussions early on in this process, but I believe we've come to some understandings and agreements on the vision for the town. First is, we are looking at 10 centers. There are a variety of, they range from high-density centers to targeted specific use type centers. I'll walk you through each of these as we go forward. We also have resource protection areas. Our resource protection areas are, we looked at what the Cape Cod Commission had come up with. This is one of the areas probably of the greatest discussion between us and the Commission. Much of the land that came up under the regional policy plan is either already developed or town protected. And there were some questions as to why you would look at some of this for resource protection. At the same time, we had resource protection areas that extended beyond the areas that the Commission had. And ultimately, the town decided that, given we already protected 2/3 of the land that was on the regional policy plan's version of the protected area, and most of the rest was already developed, that there wasn't a lot of need to be concerned with what the Commission had come up with resource protection. But our scenic views, our certain other public holdings that were not not identified in the regional policy plan we felt should be included. So our resource protection area is actually, a recommendation is actually an expansion upon what the Commission actually has in the regional policy plan. We probably add over 150 acres to resource protection designation over what the Commission had. We also have an area that's designated as other. It's the cottage colony areas in Dennisport. We look at this as a cultural preservation area. It may be, we just adopted new zoning for it. It has been identified as an area in the mass preservation plan of needing some register type protection. It may be some discussions we have in the future to ensure the cultural preservation of the area while not restricting the cottages from being able to evolve as they have for the past 50 years. Then we move into the actual economic centers that we're looking at. We have 4 centers now with zoning tools in place. Our next steps really will be, after the adoption of the Land Use Vision Plan, to move into actually talking about Chapter H type of relief for these areas, the implementation plan. The first one is the Dennisport Village Center. This was adopted in 2004. We actually had submitted this as a growth incentive zone, but as we got tied up in working on the regional policy plan and the land use vision map, ultimately we felt that a lot of what we've done for the growth incentive zone would tie into a Chapter H type of relief for this area, and that we'd be working within the regional policy plan and as a growth center, as an economic center, as opposed to the growth incentive zone. This area could probably accommodate about 100,000 square feet of additional commercial development and 200 residential units. We are looking at trying to establish a jobs housing balance in Dennisport Village Center to try to make the area more economically sustainable. The second one is the West Dennis Village Center. We adopted this zoning in 2007. It was a combination. Some areas were down-zoned. Some commercial areas were zoned to residential. Other commercial areas were zoned to open space. And we brought in at the same time some areas being up-zoned to allow additional residential and commercial space in those particular areas. The next, and this is one of the areas that had a minor change on the map you just received, is the West Dennis Hotel Resort area. As we went to the final version of our zoning proposal that went to November town meeting, there was an area of wetland that, and a couple parcels of land that our committees felt should be removed from the hotel resort designation. And I'm going to quickly jump ahead on this if I can get it to. I don't think I'm lined up right, might be the problem. Okay, do you see a green thumb? I'm going to step out of here for 1 second. That area I just pointed to, that green thumb type area, that's the area that changes between the map you originally received and the current version of the map that you just received today. This area contains the Lighthouse Inn, the West Dennis Yacht Club, and a number of commercial properties that were developed prior to 1950, before the town first adopted zoning for this area. For some reason, this area was placed in a residential zoning area when it really is a tourist destination hotel and small businesses, and we're looking at trying to be able to allow the hotels that are there and other businesses to be able to modernize. All of them sit in the flood zone. All of them have had historic flood losses due to the fact that they were built long before flood insurance and flood construction standards. Okay. Oh, now jump twice, of course. The next one is Dennisport, and again, this one has a small change to it as well. I'm going to go up there. It's actually was changed to white. That westerly border, we had brought it out to the Raycroft Beach Parkway and ultimately decided to take those properties and the properties on the north side of Old Wharf Road out. Dennisport has lost almost 210 hotel rooms in the past decade. Much of this has been because the hotel rooms that were built there were built in the 1950s and do not really meet the needs of the modern travelers, and the goal has been to try to, with this zoning, allow hotels to modernize without continuing to lose hotel room stock back and ultimately possibly to recover some of the lost hotel rooms that we've lost over the past years. Our projections are we've lost about $18 million in traveler expenditures in the past decade, and as many as 210 jobs in the tourist industry due to the fact that our hotel stock was so old. And the goal for this area is to be able to allow these hotels to modernize, allow them to expand to meet the needs. Many of the hotels took rooms and turned them into took a single room, turned it into two room, or took two rooms, turned them into a single room, or some of them shut down. We lost 5 hotels in this area in the past decade as well, because they just could not, 24-room hotels could not compete. So that's a big issue for us in trying to modernize that particular area. Again, under Chapter H, a lot of it will be redevelopment. It's all developed land as it is right now. The next area is that we're looking at, now we move into those, we still have a lot of work on our part to do as well, but we want, long-range vision. These are important areas in town. The first one is a cultural arts district on the north side along Route 6A. Presently, the Cape Playhouse sits in a residential zoning district. It is a non-conforming use, which has very great difficulty being able to modernize as well in order to continue to meet the needs of its operation and the folks who want to come there to see shows. The goal would be to create a compatible zoning district that incorporated the Playhouse and many of the other artist facilities that are currently in that area along Route 6A. The next one is South Dennis Economic Center. This is essentially Exit 9. This currently represents an isolated strip development. It also represents the economic future of Dennis. And we're looking at this. It could be something very similar to a Mashpee Commons, mixed-use center with office, retail, and residential uses all in one area where people could walk to work and walk for shopping and have many other amenities, infilling an area that is already a significant amount of development that has taken place there. Immediately adjacent to it is an area where we would be designating industrial trade center. While Harwich does not have a map as yet, I know that on some of the maps they worked on, immediately across the border in Harwich is industrial land that they also are considering as an industrial service center. So this would be actually a cross-border compatible type of a designation. We've already adopted some zoning changes in our industrial district to try to promote clean energy manufacturing in that area. You could come into Dennis today and be able to build wind turbines, build solar panels, manufacture biodiesel or blend biodiesel. It's just a matter of being able to get the proper floor space to have those types of uses take place on Cape Cod. Next is an area that I know you've made some changes in your regulations in recent years, may not be completely necessary, but one of the aspects of the regional policy plan is land use 2 that calls for coordinated public facilities with dense village settings. We've got a government center area that's Johnny Kelly Park, the police station, a possible future town hall, and housing authority housing projects that have been done in this area. And we believe that it is an area for future development, future government investments such as a new recreation center, a new senior center, and potentially more housing that could be built in this area either publicly or privately to expand the housing options in the town, and that is why we place that area on it. The next location is Sissuit Harbor. Currently, our harbor sits in a residential zoning district. We know we need to correct that. There are private and public properties in this area. We feel we need a maritime zone created that looks at the future of the Cape's harbor needs, and so creating a designation for this would provide the opportunity for a long-range vision both locally and regionally as to what this harbor area means to the town. And the final area is an interesting one. The regional policy plan, even though Mr. Kukunis sat at these tables many times saying you needed to do something for agriculture, you don't have in the land use vision map an agricultural designation. So we have placed the Aquaculture Research Center as an economic center. It is an important economic center to Cape Cod and all of southeastern Massachusetts. We recognize it. The Planning Committee, when they saw this proposal, also recognized it. Creating such a designation is consistent with several of the regional policy plan policy statements, such as Land Use 3 on rural conservation, Land Use 3C1, which calls for agricultural support by the Commission, and Economic Development 1T3, which seeks to ensure the future of working agriculture on Cape Cod. So we believe designating this as a very special economic center that will have very special sets of policies put in place for it would be a very important thing for the region. And that brings us to the plan that you have before you and that we're asking for your support for today.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from any commission members? Or yes, Elizabeth, excuse me.
I will agree completely with you and Leo. Don't tell him that. I really think, with all of the concern about preservation of agriculture and agricultural pursuits on the Cape, that it would be really good if this could be a specific designation. And even the resource protection areas, if maybe we could put in different shades of brown so that you know which ones are historic, which ones are actually open space, habitat, wetlands, that type of thing, and separate them out a little bit. But I think definitely we need to have agricultural resource protection areas, or whatever we want to call them. I really think it needs to be a part of this whole planning, because they may not have the same threshold needs or wants or desires as an economic center, but they may not be same as a resource protection area. So I think we should take a good look at this. And you talked about historical areas of historical or heritage areas of concern, and that maybe could be what we could call historic areas in towns. And I think that they need to be looked at differently than just, you know, open space and parks and that type of thing. Thank you.
Mr. Nizwicki?
Well, I agree with Elizabeth and Dan. And I mean, Dan, this is a great plan that's in front of us. I think you're going to see another good one from Bourne. And in both Dennis and Bourne, one of the issues that came up is when we started the land use vision map process, we started with four very broad categories that were clearly an oversimplification. The reason we did that is because the categorization was really about the application of Chapter H and growth incentive zones and triggers. But going forward, as it relates to aquaculture, agriculture, and marine use, I think in both Bourne and Dennis, we've learned that we need more categories. So I think you'll see that improvement to the land use vision map process sooner rather than later.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Is this little, is that
Microphone,
already
please.
aquaculture that you just...
Yes, that little area up by Chapin's Beach is the Aquaculture Research Center. And we've tried, in looking at their piece of property, you know, the economic conditions they are under, there is a strong push by some inside the business to say, we're done with it, let's sell it for residential development. By placing this on here, it's saying to them, which we've been saying in the town for more than a year, you're important to us, work with us. One of the big issues will be their expansion, if they can afford it, will be more than 10,000 square feet, and therefore would be a mandatory DRI. Hopefully we can come up with an agricultural type zoning approach for that piece of property that helps them on the assessor's side by getting rid of development potential for residential use of much of their land, and on the flip side also make it easier through the Chapter H process to be able to keep them there, allow them to implement the expansion plans that they have, so that the county has even explored avenues for trying to keep them there because they're that kind of important to Barnstable County.
They are the
Microphone, please.
hatchery.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So, yes, I'm very
Are there any other comments or questions from members of the commission? Are there any comments from either federal, state, or additional, excuse me, somebody had their hand
I
up,
just
sorry.
had one question. I don't know if this is where this belongs, but I know with the number of agriculture, I haven't had coffee yet today, so excuse me. Number of the agricultural pursuits on the Cape are looking into alternative energy, and they're hitting a rock wall because of historic district concerns. And I would hope that between the state and the county and the local agencies that somehow we can work through this, because this is becoming very critical to survival of a lot of these pursuits, and I think it's something we really have to work on.
Yes, we agree,
Now.
and that's been a big discussion in the town of Dennis. Dennis has supported ARC on their wind turbine proposal. We didn't designate in our zoning wind turbines in farmland because a farm of 5 acres is exempt from zoning anyway, and so we didn't feel we needed to. Unfortunately, that has been used as one of the arguments at the Regional Old Kings Highway against their proposal. I don't think zoning is an appropriate discussion at Old Kings Highway Regional, and I'm sure that that's part of the arguments in the appeal of the decision to overturn the local committees. But we are very much aware of, and also the change of state laws, a working farm of 2 acres that generates $1,000 per acre is exempt from zoning. ARC is exempt from zoning, and their wind turbine is consistent with state law. And it's actually also consistent with all the setback requirements we had in our zoning for wind turbines. It's just that we didn't place it a blob on the map for wind turbines because we didn't have to. You know, we recognized that it was a farm that could do that.
Looking up one line and down the other, are there any other questions or comments? Are there any additional comments from federal, state, or other local officials? Seeing none. Are there any comments from the general public? Seeing none. The chair would be willing to accept a motion to close the hearing and the record. It's been moved that the hearing and the record be closed. Is there a second? It's seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? It's approved.
Thank you.
The next item.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, what we didn't take a vote on? Okay, all right. I don't understand what we need to take a vote on.
We need to make a motion to approve the application of their land use vision
All
map.
right.
Now, does this get,
Let me just have the sample motion that I have. I move to approve the proposed Dennis land use vision map and forward the map to the Assembly of Delegates for adoption and incorporation into the regional land use vision map.
just as I said, thank you. I
This is
move
a-
that.
I'm sorry,
I move
I rushed
that.
ahead. I had it right in front of me. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? I'm sorry, Mr. Dennis. All right, the next one is the Regional Land Use Vision Map Amendment, Town of Bourne, December 2nd, 2010. The Cape Cod Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, December 2nd, beginning at 3 p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates Chamber, Route 6A, Barnstable. At this hearing, the Commission will consider a proposed amendment to the Regional Land Use Vision Map to review and incorporate the Bourne Land Use Vision Map. The Regional Land Use Vision Map was adopted as part of the 5-year amendment of the Regional Policy Plan, Barnstable County Ordinance 08-14, as amended. All right. we will have staff presentation, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'll be brief. It's nice to do two of these in a row. We know what we're doing now. Corinne Moore, the town planner from the town of Bourne, is here to provide more of an overview of the map that they've proposed. In terms of process, the planning board voted on October 14th to send the map to the commission for review and consideration. On October 28th, our planning committee reviewed the map and voted to recommend it to the full commission for adoption. And with that, I will hand it over to Corinne.
Good afternoon, Corinne Moore, the Bourne Town Planner, and I just apologize, I have a cold, so I hope I don't cough or sneeze in the middle of my presentation. I really don't have a presentation, I just want to kind of do an overview of Bourne's process of getting to this point with the land use vision map. Bourne actually started in 2008 to produce this map, and it's been a long journey, and I'm glad to be here today. As you'll see on the map that's presented to you that you've been given by staff, is that Bourne is only at this time designating the north side of the canal in Bourne. It's been a long discussion between the planning board, myself, and with the staff. The planning board does not at this time feel comfortable in designating the south side. There are a lot of issues on the south side, those that are located around the Bourne Rotary and MacArthur's Boulevard. The south side of Bourne, like many other towns, have zone 2s, have marine recharge areas. There are a lot of resource areas, but within those resource areas, there are also economic areas. There's also industrial areas. And the first attempt that we tried to designate these according to the land use vision map designations, it just was not being cohesive. Our board decided to come up with their own designations, and they started labeling them, and they felt really comfortable with those designations. And when we submitted them to the Cape Cod Commission, it was like, those don't match our designations. And so it was kind of the planning board really had to come to the point where they could look at the Cape Cod Commission designations and apply them to the town. So what we did, we kind of backed up. We took our own designations in the town. We layered it on the GIS maps. We showed all of our water resource districts, our zone 2s, the natural heritage layers, all those layers that we have in town. We layered those first, and then we began to take the Cape Cod Commission's designations, and then we laid those on top of our designations that we had. And the planning board can see that we basically already have protection in those areas that the Cape Cod Commission is asking us to designate. So we did that, and we were able to come up with agreement on the north side of the canal. And also, I want to thank the executive director for visiting our town to have this discussion with us, because it's always been a pull with the town of Bourne. The town of Bourne doesn't do things too easily. We are the first town on the Cape, and we're surrounded by non-Cape Cod Commission towns. So it's difficult for us. So it takes us a little while to get there, but we do get there eventually. So what you see today is the map that we've come up with. Basically, on the intro, I just want to make a few corrections. On B, it says that the industrial service trade area includes the new elementary school. It does not include the new elementary school. Actually, you'll see kind of that white parcel kind of in the middle. That is the new elementary school. The reason we have not designated that, because that parcel is still up for discussion in the town. Whether it should be a new DPW, what kind of facility should be there. So we did not want to designate that at this time. And the other thing, it talks about 5 other areas that are basically labeled other. it really, the south side at this time is really, we want to designate that as other. It's basically because we still want to have time to plan that. So we can also include that as other at this time. And I think the most important thing that we've done here is the Buzzards Bay District, that we've designated that as an economic center. Many know that we've been working very hard in that area, and we're proposing a growth incentive zone in that area, so we know that's where we want our growth to go. We all can agree on that in the town. So that's basically, you know, just an overview of what we've done, and if you have any questions, I can answer those questions.
Are there any questions from members of the commission? Yes, Paul?
I just want to point out that we have had discussions with Bourne for a long time, and I think we have to be sensitive on the commission that Bourne is in a very different position as a municipality than every other town that we represent. It is the only town that borders non-commissioned towns, and it is a town that is literally split in two by the Cape Cod Canal. And with some of the challenges, infrastructure challenges related to that, we do need to pay special attention to Bourne. What this represents is the process of building a relationship with the community of Bourne and starting in those areas where we have consensus. And there's been a lot of work done in Buzzards Bay, and Tom Garino and Sally Riggs are in the audience today, the town administrator and the Bourne Financial Development Corporation. And I believe that the stars are lining up on the north side of the canal for Bourne. There's a ton of opportunity. That's why we need the map today. We need to move forward with this growth incentive zone because those stars won't remain aligned forever. And I think there's an opportunity to move there now, and it's imperative that we do so. So I think this represents a little bit of a deviation for us, but I think it's completely understandable why the south side isn't designated. And really, we have to keep in mind that the designation of the land use vision map really allows the towns access to those tools like Chapter H and growth incentive zones. And so the only thing that happens by not designating the south part of that is that those tools won't be used in the southern part of Bourne right now. And when you look at the interaction with the Mass Military Reservation and some of the issues on the state highways that run through the southern part, MacArthur's Boulevard, I think it's completely understandable why. And consistent with what I said before about Dennis, there are certain areas that we may want to create as land use vision map areas that designate marine uses and other such things that might make the discussion about the south side of the canal an easier one to have in the town of Bourne. But this represents a lot of work by Corinne and by the town of Bourne. And I think it's a huge step forward, and there's a lot of work yet to be done, but we need to get this piece out of the way before we move on with the growth incentive zone and some of those other important projects.
Yes.
As a member of the planning committee, I was one of the ones for the first time approving a map that was not a complete map. And I thought we might be establishing a precedent, but obviously it was brought to my attention that Bourne is unique, and I don't think we'll find another town that has similar circumstances. So I'm in favor of approval of this map.
Thank you. Are there other comments, questions? Next, we'll have, excuse me.
Speaking as another town that has a large white swath going through the center of town, I appreciate, and I hope everybody does, and especially the planning committee when they work on these, that every single town is going to be totally different from every other town. And each town is probably going to end up needing specific designations just like Dennis did. And I think we need to work some sort of flexibility into this whole process, and we may need to come up with a lot more some sub-designations than we have now. But one of them may be, you know, a Marine Economic Center, which would work very well for Bourne. Thank you.
I have one clarification. I was just speaking to Sharon. On the south side of the canal, I was calling it other, but really it's undefined at this time, so I don't want to put that designation on there.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And I just want to make a comment that you really can't appreciate.
Sheila, microphone, please.
Until you see it on a map, you don't really appreciate the presence of the military base. in your town, and it is quite overwhelming in some ways. So, you've got a lot to work with there, but thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have any comments from federal, state, or other local officials? None? Any comments from the general public? None? The chair will entertain a motion to close the hearing on the record at this time.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Moving along, it would be appropriate to move to approve the proposed Dennis land use vision map.
Bourne.
Excuse me.
Well, that was a very nice map.
It's a typographical error, not an error of my comment, fortunately. Anyway, the Bourne land use vision map, and forward the map to the Assembly of Delegates for adoption and incorporation into the regional land use vision map.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yes.
So moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the 2009 Regional Policy Plan. And pursuant to the Cape Cod Commission Act, Chapter 716 of the Acts of 1989, as amended, Section 8H, the Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, December 2nd, 2010, beginning at 3 p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse Assembly of Delegates Chamber, Route 6A, Barnstable. At this hearing, the Commission will consider proposed technical amendments to minimum performance standards LU 1.1, LU 2.1, ED 1.1, and ED 1.2 of the Commission's Regional Policy Plan, Barnstable County Ordinance 08-14, as amended. Barnstable County Ordinance 08-14 is the 5-year revision to the Regional Policy Plan, Barnstable County Ordinance 91-6, as adopted by the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates and the Barnstable County Commissioners. I'm going to invite presentation by the staff. Christy Senatori.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Christy Senatori, Chief Regulatory Officer for the Commission. The amendments that are proposed before you are for clarification purposes. You will see that language has been added or amended to 4 of the minimum performance standards, 2 in the land use section and 2 in the economic development section. And I'll just walk you through the changes briefly. In the land use section, the added language has been proposed to minimum performance standards LU 1.1 and LU 1.2. These standards require project consistency with the designated land use category, and the language that's been amended is simply to clarify that these standards only apply to developments that have been proposed in areas that are designated on the land use, the regional land use vision map. If a development is proposed within a town that does not have a land use vision map, or in a portion of town like Bourne that does not have that area of the town mapped, then these standards would not apply. In the economic development section, the added language again just provides further clarification that for developments that are proposed within towns without a map or within unmapped portions of a town, that the location of the development cannot be found to be consistent with the mapped designation, and therefore the project would need to meet certain waiver criteria in order to be found consistent with these standards. If you find that these proposed changes are acceptable, you can vote today to approve the changes to the minimum performance standards and forward them to the Assembly of Delegates for adoption and incorporation into the regional policy plan. And lastly, as you may recall, the ordinance with the proposed wind standards wind minimum performance standards that was remanded by the Assembly of Delegates in November also contained some minor technical corrections to the RPP. These were already approved by the Commission, and as such, these technical corrections need to be forwarded to the Assembly of Delegates again. And if you're so inclined at this time, I'd suggest that you can vote to consolidate the land use and economic development standard amendments with those technical corrections and forward them to the Assembly of Delegates as one ordinance. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Do we have any questions from members of the commission? Do we have any comments or questions from federal, state, or local officials? Are there any? Yes.
In light of the fact that the Assembly sent back the recommendations for wind, and there's now a proposal to put the land use and with the wind.
You want to speak into the microphone?
Are we saying that we would fix or address what it is that the Assembly wants and then submit both of these together? Is that what you just proposed?
Through the chair, the wind standards would be completely separate. This is just the technical corrections
Excuse me. Okay.
that the Commission has already approved. Because they were one ordinance sent to the Assembly, the whole ordinance was remanded back, so we need to send those technical corrections forward again.
I thank you for clarifying that. I didn't listen the whole way.
Yes. Yes, Elizabeth.
I just had one question. If we're going to change designations or come up with sub-designations, does that have to go to the Assembly too?
Yes.
All right, so how do areas fit that are being sent to the Assembly that are new designations on maps?
Chief
How does
Planner
that-
will address that.
How does that fit in with what the Assembly does?
Well, the designations that were proposed today, the two maps that were proposed today, I'm sorry, Sharon Rooney, Chief Planner, they're consistent with the 5 categories that we have today, so they're consistent with our current mapping.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from members of the commission? Any comments or questions from federal, state, or local officials? Any comments from the general public? It would be appropriate for somebody to move to close the hearing of the record at this point.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It also would be appropriate for us to move and approve the proposed amendments to the minimum performance standards and forward them to the Assembly of Delegates for adoption and incorporation into the regional policy plan. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Any discussion? Excuse me. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. And it's also appropriate that we, in this matter, we move to consolidate the previously approved regional policy plan technical corrections with the approved minimum performance standards for land use and economic development and forward them as one ordinance to the Assembly of Delegates for adoption and incorporation into the regional policy plan. Second? Any further comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous, and thank you very much. The next item on our agenda this is, okay. Do we have a hearing notice on this matter?
Yes.
Maybe I do and I don't see it. Which one? Thank you. Yes, hearing notice, Cape Cod Commission, Chapter A DRI Enabling Regulations Amendment, December 2nd. The Cape Cod Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, December 2nd, 2010, beginning at 3 p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates Chamber, Route 6A, Barnstable, Mass. At this hearing, the Commission will consider a proposed amendment to Section 16, Schedule of Fees of Chapter A, Enabling Regulations, Governing Review of Development or Regional Impact, Barnstable County Ordinance 90-12 as amended. All right, and Jessica will.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jessica Wilgus. I'm Commission Counsel. And you have before you amendments to Section 16, which is the Schedule of Fees. And I will walk you through a very brief PowerPoint which outlines that highlights all the changes that are contained in the text. This came about before the Executive Committee because the Commission does a periodic review of the fee schedule itself to ensure adequate cost recovery for the regulatory program, also to ensure that fees charged are appropriate for the type of project that relative to its cost. The goal here is partial cost recovery, in that municipal, state, and federal projects are, by definition, exempt from fees, and the community derives a public benefit from our Development of Regional Impact Review. So what exactly did the Executive Committee review? They looked at the regulatory revenue and fee waiver history in the course of time. They also looked at fee schedules of similar agencies and the cost to review actual projects. So there was a lot of work done by the committee on this. They looked at the regulatory revenue history over the course of fiscal years, and as you can see, it fluctuated over the years and is a little bit lower right now. And we also looked at cost versus revenue, and certainly we don't recover all of our costs, but we do defray the cost of review by these fees themselves. So when we look at fee waivers, we've had 107 requests to date. 5 were withdrawn, 4 had a modified fee schedule, 22 were denied, and 76 of those were approved, or 78% of the requests. The committee took a look at other land use regulatory agencies across the country. They vary fees in different methods. The methods that were examined were fees based on size or number of units. We also looked at fees based on the cost of construction, as well as greater of size or cost of construction. And when we did look at that, the Executive Committee did come to the conclusion that the method that we use now is the most appropriate for the reviews that we do. The committee also examined selected projects. They looked at DRIs, non-residential. They looked at hardships and DCPC exemptions, limited review, and minor modifications number 2. And what the committee did is they actually looked at projects under each one of these categories, several projects under each one of these categories, to see what the cost recovery was before, what it would be proposed under the new schedule, and determine whether or not they thought the changes that we were proposing were appropriate. The considerations that they made is that they wanted to see some better cost recovery. We wanted to make it less onerous for small businesses and encourage good development in the right places. And finally, one of the things that the Executive Committee had asked us for was objective standards for fee reductions. As you may know, the Executive Committee is the one that is charged with hearing fee waiver requests. And the current, as it's currently written, it says they can be waived for financial hardships or otherwise. And there's no other guidance to the committee as to what circumstances would allow them to reduce fees. So we gave them some objective considerations. Finally, the recommendations that came out, and these are in your, you have a red line version of the fee schedule itself and the changes that are going to be made. This is a list of what they are. So the committee recommends that we maintain the cost structure based on size. that there be an elimination of what's known as the base fee for certain commercial and mixed-use projects. And the reason for that was to make it easier on small businesses, so that $10,000 base fee is eliminated in that circumstance. Then that's on page 1 of your draft. They also created a fee category for wind turbines and utilities. And this is because even though at the present moment we don't have standards, if something were to be discretionarily reviewed to us, we don't have a category for wind energy conversion facilities to even know what type of fee needs to be charged for the review of that project. So that's on here in that instance, and in the instance that we would at some point have either a threshold or some standards that would require our review. One thing that is lacking as a result of the remand from the Assembly at this point is a definition of wind energy conversion facility that was included in the language that was sent up within the standards. So one amendment I would propose before you today is to insert the definition of wind energy conversion facility as it exists in our model bylaw, so that everyone will know what we mean by that, just for purposes of the fee schedule. And just for purposes of the record, I'd just like to read this so that if you're so inclined to make that amendment, you could. It's defined as all equipment, machinery, and structures utilized in connection with the conversion of wind to electricity. This includes, but is not limited to, all transmission, storage, collection, and supply equipment, substations, transformers, site access, service roads, and machinery associated with the use. A wind energy conversion facility may consist of one or more wind turbines. The next change was an annual adjustment of fees linked to the Consumer Price Index. That just allows fees to run with the market so that they're not stagnant, and that's on page 4. And the last one, which I've already presented somewhat, was to provide opportunities for the Executive Committee to reduce fees based on specific criteria. And those criteria are on the next slide. The fee reduction categories that the Executive Committee approved were if it's located in an economic center, as designated by the Regional Land Use Vision Map, that would entitle them to a 15% discount on the fees. If it's a redevelopment, another 15%. If it's a nonprofit or a charitable trust, that would be 10% discount. And if it is a division of land for estate purposes or conservation donation, that would be another 10%. So those are the objective criteria. Certainly, we haven't changed the ability for hardship exemption applicants to obtain a 50% fee reduction, so that still exists as well. But that basically summarizes everything that you have in your text, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Comments? Thank you. Please.
She read the amendment. Microphone, please.
Yep, I'm sorry. She read the amendment to us about the wind. Was that printed anywhere where the public would see that?
That is on our website.
Okay.
It is available under the model bylaw as the definition for a wind energy conversion facility. It's also available in all of the draft legislation that we had put forth before the Assembly, if that's still available. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
So you would want us to move or approve that for inclusion?
Yes, I would. I'd like for you to approve it as amended.
As amended?
Yes.
All right. Yes, Roger.
Mr. Chairman, I question the use of the CPI as a reason, as a technique for raising these fees. What you're going to end up with are fees that ends up with 81 cents and 42 cents and all the rest of it. My suggestion is that rather than that, you round it off every couple of years or set a designated time when you're going to restudy the fees, but don't make it cumbersome.
Right.
Excuse me.
Do you want to touch that, or Leslie?
the way, for the record, Leslie Richardson, Economic Development Officer. The way that the section reads, it does say at the very end, it shall be rounded to the nearest dollar or cent as appropriate.
Wouldn't it be easier to, rather than going that way, to every couple of years redesignate so you come out nice and even? I mean, you're still going to end up with funny numbers all the time if you use the CPI.
I think the reason that we use the CPI is because it is a standard measure of inflation over time, and
Well,
that's what this...
You're going to have to add a member to your staff to figure it out every time, too, for goodness sakes. No, I mean, I'm very serious. Do it every now and again and do it properly. Don't get to end up with pennies and nickels and dimes in the thing, really.
It'll be done on an annual basis, and the new figure will start with the fiscal year.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Welcome. Jessica?
Yes, depending upon the will of the body, if you're so inclined to want to remove that section, we're more than happy to do that. It was just a suggestion.
Okay. Was there another comment? All right. Now, what do we want to do with that suggestion? Do we want to incorporate it?
Mr. Chairman, if you want me to, I will move that it be deleted.
Is there
And by that, he's referring to under subsection, let's see.
Subsection 7 of section 3, I think.
8. VII.
18, I guess it is. It's subsection 7 under 18.
Which begins with the paragraph, the fees established in this section
Yes.
shall be adjusted
Yeah.
annually under the Consumer Price
Yeah.
Index.
Is there agreement?
You can have discussion after the motion.
All right. We're talking about Roger's motion.
Yeah.
Is there any further comment on that? Is there any discussion?
I didn't know, I asked if there was a second. I didn't hear a second.
Oh, do we have a second? Oh. I assumed we did, but
I'll
do we
second
have a
it.
second?
I'll second for discussion
Moving
because there seems to be
second,
people who want
okay.
to talk about it. So,
Is there any further discussion? All in favor will signify by raising their hand. All opposed, raise your hand.
Get them way up there.
Any abstention? It looks like it does not carry.
Okay.
Well, when they come back to us for a budget increase, I'll say I told you so.
Good. All right. Now, on the fee item, it's appropriate now that we move to approve the proposed amendment to Chapter A, enabling regulation schedule of fee as amended, and forward the
Excuse me,
amendment
Mr.
to the
Chair?
Assembly of Delegates for adoption and incorporation into the regulations.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just for procedural purposes, you may want to go through the closing of the hearing in the record.
So moved.
That's right. That's one of those two. Somebody want to move to close the hearing in the record?
So moved.
Been done.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No opposition. Okay. Then, yes. All right. It's appropriate that we move to approve the proposed amendment to Chapter A, enabling regulation, schedule of fees as amended, and forward the amendment to the Assembly of Delegates for adoption and incorporation into the regulation.
so moved.
Does it meet everybody's second? All right, all in favor, any questions or comments? All in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? It's passed. Okay. Then we have from Christie Senatori a notification of, no, we have a public hearing procedural only, and that's Paige.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Paige Sapiega, Regulatory Officer. I am here to act as a hearing officer this evening and continue the public hearing for the Chatham Park Cellular Tower Extension Project to the next meeting of the full Cape Cod Commission, December 16th, 3:00 p.m., and it will be here in the Assembly of Delegates Chamber in the 1st District Courthouse. And no action is needed by you today. Thank you.
Thank you, and you did that perfectly.
Thank you.
Okay. And then we have Christy Senatori, who is to bring a notification of withdrawal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Christy Senatori, Chief Regulatory Officer for the Commission. The Cape Cod Cooperative Bank Mashpee Woods project was referred to the Commission as a development of regional impact. You have correspondence in your packet from Attorney Michael Ford. On behalf of the applicant, he is requesting withdrawal of this project from consideration at the local level as well as from consideration of Commission review. The town of Mashpee has received the withdrawal notification on October 14th, and as such, the withdrawal has been perfected at the local level. In order to formalize the withdrawal, I would just simply suggest that the Commission vote today to accept the withdrawal of the project from Commission review.
Would somebody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Any comments or questions? Excuse me. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Now, any other business? Yes, Mr. Executive Director. Ryan.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Which one goes first?
If I could, Ryan Christenberry, planner for the Cape Cod Commission. I just wanted to highlight an illustrative error on the Bourne land use vision map. It was noted in the testimony by Corinne, and I have been advised that there's no need to reopen the record or make any motions, but the area south of the canal that appears on the map as designated as other, we'd like to clarify that with some sort of gradient that shows that it's actually undesignated, just to clarify the map.
So, do we need to move? Yes.
Yeah, that was before we voted.
Okay. So we've already voted on this, so we'd have to move to amend it by...
No.
No, Mr. Chairman.
It's just a notification.
Yeah.
I think just clarification,
Yeah.
the presentation told us of that fact during their presentation, so when we accepted it with that knowledge.
All right.
Right. So just wanted to make it clear that the map for illustrative purposes, reasons only will reflect that discussion.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Just a couple of things. I missed our new regulatory officer, Liz Enos, who is here. So she can wave. That's Liz. Liz is our new regulatory officer, so you'll probably be acquainted with her sooner rather than later. And then the other thing I did want to discuss is the action taken by the Assembly of Delegates last week based on the standards that we proposed to them for wind. So we proposed 3 standards, as you may recall, for safety setback, for flicker, and for noise. And the Assembly sent those standards back. And so we're in the process of trying to figure out how we're going to process that information and respond to that. So we'll probably be reconvening the subcommittee to consider that. The sense of the Assembly was that the standards didn't go far enough, is the language that I heard over and over again, but it's been very frustrating. There's a lot of discussion about a 3,000-foot setback that we had in the original draft. That was a 3,000-foot setback from residential dwellings. That was a rebuttable presumption to trigger a noise study. It was never a 3,000-foot setback that would prohibit the construction of these facilities. And in fact, removing that number made the regulation more onerous on applicants because now everybody's required for a noise study. So there were a number of nuances to those standards that I don't think were fully comprehended during the process. And occasionally we do struggle in trying to explain things fully to the Assembly because there's really no process by which we make a full presentation in front of the entire Assembly. We often make that presentation in front of the subcommittee, and often a breakdown between subcommittees report to the full assembly, and then our limited ability to respond in front of the assembly is at times frustrating, but we're trying to work through that with the speaker, and we're going to have a new assembly soon. So we will be responding to the wind standards that were referred to us. But those standards only would have applied to projects that would have tripped Cape Cod Commission review for other reasons. We currently have a project like that, which sort of underlined the need for those standards. It's sort of silly to have a project that we have to review, and the major aspect of that project is the creation of wind energy conversion facilities and having no standards by which to judge those turbines. Having said that, there was a sense from the Assembly that we should consider a threshold for Cape Cod Commission review, which was not part of that discussion. And there was also some discussion by the Assembly of the nomination of a district of critical planning concern for land-based wind turbines Cape-wide. And we received, the county commissioners received a letter from the planning board in the town of Falmouth yesterday, asking them to consider the designation of a district of critical planning concern in the 4 Upper Cape towns for land-based wind turbines. So there is a lot of activity going on as it relates to wind. This is land-based wind, and it coincides with our efforts to determine a process to apportion 24 offshore turbines and determine the appropriate scale of community wind projects and how we're going to allocate those projects. Now, we expected that we would have some discussion of potential ordinances on the offshore wind in a June timeframe. That policy committee that we put together to review that will be meeting again in January. The technical advisory committee has been meeting for the last 3 or 4 months, and we convened the stakeholders committee on that. So we're in the process of trying to figure out whether we're going to align both the land-based approach and the offshore approach, or whether there's a more immediate response necessary, if possible, for land-based review. And then we have these outside entities that potentially could use the DCPC tool to foster that discussion more quickly than we had anticipated. So, you know, we're in the difficult position of the Assembly having decided that no regulations were better than some regulations. And I think an impression out there that being more specific in those standards is actually going to increase the amount of regulation when really it's going to decrease the amount of questions that we can ask in a particular review. So it's been a frustrating process, but it's an incredibly important process, so that will continue. And I just wanted to bring you up to date, although I may have confused you more than brought you up to date, but you have company. So there'll be more to hear on that wind matter, but I would just, you know, at the chair's discretion, open it up in case any member of the commission has a question that relates to the action by the Assembly last week that I might be able to answer, or staff might be able to fill in the blanks on.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask of our director regarding this matter?
I just would like to
excuse me, go ahead.
Make an observation, maybe a question. You were saying that the nuances of the regulation might have been lost, and I think it's easy for that to happen. And I know just from the, I think in the beginning, it was even reported in the paper, or some groups were saying, you are now saying that, you know, 1,500 feet, I think in the beginning 1,500 feet was kind of a number that was being, as a setback. We were looking at different standards of different areas. So that got reported out. So they're saying that, you know, the Cape Cod Commission is saying that anything, you know, from 1,500 feet in or out, you know, they were taking that and interpreting it the way they wanted to, and what it was actually meaning is, you know, that would just trip a noise test or something. Is it worth the unpredictability of what could happen by having maybe an assembly designee from whatever that committee is in some of those subcommittee meetings, or just or when it's fine, when it's basically being, in the end, so that they can understand that a little bit more clearly, the work that goes into it on some of these things, so that they can report back somebody that they would designate.
Well, if I understand, it calls for, I think, a new process for being extraordinarily clear about the ordinances that we're putting in front of the Assembly and the Commissioners as it relates to wind. There's such a heightened sensitivity on this issue that it really calls for us to be as thoughtful and as concise as we can be, and as public about the meaning of every word in the standard that goes forward. So I think you'll see that process going forward. The problem is that in order to adopt that process, will undoubtedly slow our ability to respond. But I think that we can work that out. So we have to be as careful as we need to be moving forward to make sure that everybody understands in that what we're proposing, and that it's not so easily misrepresented in a number of different formats that are widely available to people these days. So we understand the need to do that, and I think the inclusion of the Assembly, I mean, we have done that before. The subcommittee reports, I mean, I don't want to be critical of anybody in the process, so I'm just going to leave it there and understand that we need to do a better job at explaining what we're putting in front of them, and we're going to do that.
If the chair could make a comment, it seems to me that folks that are interested in what is happening at the Cape Cod Commission in terms of their regulations and standards and so forth, everything is done in public. They were posted, and everybody's able to come and comment if they would like.
That's an excellent point, and maybe just by giving them not just the general notices that go out with everybody else, but giving them a specific notice that this is the dates that we are actually discussing, so if anybody wants to attend, since this was something that,
That's a
it
good
might be
idea.
more clarity, that maybe even just that gesture of making sure that they're, it's like, putting it in bold in front of them.
Well, the process that's available was available last time, and so I think we need to take an extra step. I think what might be involved this time I think we may have to have what amounts to a press conference, where we invite members of the media in and we share the information with them. We allow them to vet and ask questions prior to a vote or prior to sending it to the Assembly. But we need to take that extra step, and that's one way that we might be able to do that, and we're considering others. So, but we will inform you as we move forward.
Do we have any other comments from members of the Commission? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion that we adjourn. Moved and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Is there any?
And yes, you want to make that announcement, Elizabeth?
The holiday gathering for the Cape Cod Commission is going to be after our next meeting on December 16th. So I trust that you've all received invitations to that, and we're available to assist in any way if anyone needs to touch base with us. Carrie Cahoon was planning on being here, but she's not here this afternoon. You give it to Gail.
All right. I want to thank Elizabeth for taking the role, and
Carrie Cahoon.
you want to give us a check, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I want to give a check for like $10, and I want to know whose name I saw.
Terry. All right. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn, so we haven't lost track of it, so I guess we did vote on it. So
We're adjourned.